Dolly Parton works overtime. This is the focus group.
They're all business, except when they're not. It's the Focus Group with Tim Bennett and John Nash.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Focus Group. Tim Bennett here, as always, with my good friend and co-host, Mr. John T. Nash. We're here every week with our show, The Focus Group, in our 14th year. We're happy to announce we are one of the top 1% podcasts globally. There's 3 million of them, John. 2.9 million podcasts.
2,950,948.
You have the exact number?
I'm looking at the number you gave me. Actually, that's the exact number. Yeah.
From the analytics, and you and I are doing some new updated sell sheets because everybody wants numbers. So if you get a chance, wherever you listen to us, please follow us and like us because people want to see those numbers. But we're very pleased that of all those podcasts out there, we're in the top 1% as well as in the top 100 of all the marketing podcasts. So we appreciate
or the top 50, depending on the week.
Yeah, and you know, depending on the analytic. Right?
Well, yeah, I think I like top 50 because you top 50 of the marketing podcast by Chartable was the analytical.
By Chartable through Apple Analytics, formerly known
the
as
minute
iTunes.
You say Apple Analytics, the minute you say Apple Analytics, it's the imprintor of finery. Like, oh, Apple Analytics.
So anyway, if you know anybody or your company, you should be on the show. Right, we want to thank our sponsors over the years, a lot of people who put us here, and those of you who've listened to us after all these years, we appreciate it. And the other interesting thing is we find out there's so many people who listen that have not subscribed, or which we don't. I listen to podcasts too that I have not subscribed to, or
that's true.
You don't like things, so that's the big fallacy with all these numbers that people want clicks and clacks and all this other stuff along the way, is trying to convince people that not everybody that likes something either is engaged with it or
clicking
and clacking and all that nonsense. But so these third party evidence guide, as we used to call them, evidence guides at Suber, or evidence is helpful. So thank you. So
if you're watching on video, as Tim was talking, I was like, my screen was vibrating because I was moving my computer away from me a bit, because Paul and Mass once said, John's got to be a little further back.
You're like Kim Jong. He's like Kim Jong Un.
You don't want to take
with Team America.
By the way, okay. Speaking of movies, if anybody is a Turner Classic Movie fan, and by the way, a partner of ours here on the Focus Group is Deep Discount. We would love for you to shop at their site by going to ours, focusgroupradio.com, clicking on the Deep Discount logo. So anything I'm talking about, you can probably pick up from Deep Discount. I know you can. Mario Cantone has been doing Monday night hosting with Ben Mankiewicz on TCM, and he's been picking his favorite. I guess the theme would be Halloween or horror movies, but at the beginning of the month, he kicked off the whole thing with Mildred Pierce, because he thought it was an amazing film noir.
Is that a horror?
Well, no, he put it in the film noir category. Well, horror would be Mommy Dearest, right? Bring me the axe, metal hangers. Then he picked a movie that I rarely see, but I like it, called Dead Ringers with Bette Davis. And a movie that he picked 1 or 2 weeks ago, I had never seen before, was Joan Crawford, and I want to say the movie was called Obsessed. And she plays a nurse that cares for some guy's ailing wife, and the daughter thinks that she's falling in love with the guy or the husband, and it's got this cast that you would recognize from like The Lot. Like, let's bring in him, and him. He's on contract. But the funny thing is, Joan Crawford, we know her from a handful of movies.
Right.
And hopefully you don't know her from Trog. Remember that one of the last movies she ever made was that ghastly cult, horror film or something. She's not a bad actress, and there you go. So,
well, talk about how people are culturally different, I guess. So I was in a meeting here in Rehoboth Beach, a city meeting, and it was a closed meeting, but we were in a boardroom type setting. And we were all lined up on each side of the table, and they were putting the person at the very end, had to come in and sit at the end. And I jokingly said, oh, it's like a scene out of Mommy Dearest.
Mommy Dearest.
And everybody sat and looked at me blankly. And I'm like, Mommy Dearest, where Joan Crawford sits at the end of the, and the only, Patrick just smiled. That was it. He was the only one who got the,
I know Patrick. He's the
right. But he got he got the reference. But I'm looking
I'm
around
on
at
the
everybody.
board of this lousy
Right.
company.
And I'm just, and it was set up perfectly, exactly like that. All men sitting there. And I'm thinking, this is perfect. Nobody got it.
And then she's sitting at the end with
The
that
fur
fur
hat.
and the diamond brooch.
I,
I'm on the board of
this
directors.
lousy company.
Well, it was a sword that cuts both ways. Well, Mrs. Crawford, we didn't realize the depth of your commitment. By the way, just to throw that out there, you can go to Deep Discount and get the restored print of Mommy Dearest, because they did a remaster of the video and the audio, and it looks it sparkles. So
Have you watched the one where, and I think it's Criterion, where they have, it might be Criterion, where they have the commentary by John Waters?
Is that for Mommy Dearest?
Yeah. So as the movie's playing, John Waters is doing commentary, which is hilarious.
This is, Tim, this is one great reason why DVDs and Blu-rays and 4K, all that, still trumps streaming, because you get that. Like, I sometimes watch movies with commentary.
Yeah.
I would do that in a
So
second.
he talks about how he was actually, when he saw it actually in the theater, and he said, so this part that's coming up, when she beats the shit out of her daughter,
Yeah.
well, the PR person's there on the typewriter. He says Christina's kicking her little panties are showing. He goes, the crowd's going wild in the theater in Baltimore. She's kicking her legs up.
that scene is the woman's name was Barbara, I think, and she
Right.
was from some famous magazine, and she's like, well, you're home from school, and she did something wrong. She goes, that's a lie.
But John Waters is like, the PR person's there, like doing stories, and she's like, who Joan Crawford beats her daughter in front of the PR person. Like, who cares, right? I mean, but just the way he delivers the whole thing and the scene's going, and yeah, he said the crowd was obviously inappropriately laughing when they weren't, was supposed to, how absurd the movie was and why it's such a cult classic. So.
All right. I didn't mean to veer into that category, but thank you for letting us know, or reminding me that, because you did mention this once before, that he did a commentary track, and it's going to be worth seeing, right? Or worth
It's
listening
just
to.
another way. If you've seen it a million times, it's just another way to listen to it,
I'll tell another one, Silence of the Lambs, one of our top movies, total top movie. If you watch the commentary, and you can, if you get the disc, I believe it's Criterion has it now, you get the disc, you can watch the director's commentary or listen to Jodie Foster chime in now and then. And there's a scene where Anthony Hopkins does that. I don't suppose the answer's on those cheap shoes. Sometimes you wear Laird de Tomp, but not today. And he does this whole thing where he comes up to the glass and he says, I ate a census taker once and had his liver with Chianti. Ugh. And he does that thing. And they... the director and Jodie Foster both said that when Anthony Hopkins dropped into character, they became like scared crapless, because he
Really?
so thoroughly, did Hannibal Lecter. He channeled this horrible human being. I don't suppose
they were scared.
Cheap shoes,
Let it on.
but not today.
Fava beans. So, with all that, so we've done our move. So we've done our deep discount segment.
And it's not even a deep discount week. Yeah,
I know. So, what caught your eye this week, Mr. Nash?
What caught your eye? Here's what Tim and John found.
Oh, Tim, you and I find the oddest stories on the face of the planet, and this one I think you're going to really appreciate if you haven't seen it. The headline: a young man became allergic to orgasms, but there's a happy ending. Tee-hee-hee. So it's an actual medical thing. A young man became allergic to his own orgasms. It's a condition that apparently only about 1,000 people in the U.S. are estimated to suffer, but it is real. And it's called post-orgasmic illness syndrome. Sufferers, almost exclusively men, experience symptoms similar to hay fever or a flu following ejaculation, such as fatigue, itchy eyes, stuffy or runny nose, and even memory problems. These symptoms appear after nearly every orgasm, usually within seconds, which is weird, but sometimes up to hours later, and they can last from anywhere from 2 days to 7 days. So this guy,
Come on. Really?
yeah, he sought the treatment of many different doctors. They hypothesized that it was that maybe an antihistamine could override this response. And so when they looked at this, the National Institute of Health, I said earlier, estimates that fewer than 1,000 people in the U.S. currently have it. They do believe that it is caused by an allergen in the ejaculate. So they're not sure why that would be the case, that your own body would make something that you're that allergic to. But that's what they've tracked this down to. And so he saw multiple allergists. He saw multiple doctors. They would give him something. It would work kind of, but he would still have these horrible experiences. And so he just basically stayed away from sex until he goes to a different set of doctors. And they're like, well, let's see now, and so they did those allergy tests, the prick tests to
Right.
see what you're allergic to. And finally, during an interview, the guy said that this first came up when he had something called acute epididymitis. And the epididymitis is the inflammation around a specific area of the scrotum. So it's like a swelling. It's like sort of an infection type thing. It's a urinary tract, and so also usually caused by a sexually transmitted disease. This was some time ago, but that set off this thing from the get-go. So he sees this new set of doctors, and they recommend something called fexofenadine. Now, you may know this as the common over-the-counter antihistamine called Allegra.
Oh, for God's sakes.
And they gave it to him, and it's worked ever since. And they believe the reason why this time around that this is now a treatment that's working for him. He can now... it reduced his symptoms by over 90%, is because Allegra, or this class of drugs, is long-lasting. It's not like a 4-hour thing. It's like a 12 or 24-hour dosing. And so that keeps his system, his histamine system, from attacking itself. And there you go.
Did you find this in the Christian Science Monitor? Maybe
No,
where'd you find
I know. You might think so, but this was like I think it was either in Vice or Huffington Post.
You sure it wasn't the feather pillows he was allergic to? I get allergic to feather pillows and things.
I do too. No, they ran a full battery of tests, and they determined it was something in the ejaculate.
Not lube or anything like that?
No. But he's resumed sex again. So there you go. I know, Tim. I know. I've had some weird ones lately. The woman who swallowed all the batteries.
I was going to say, I've got to up my periodicals.
Or you got to start reading the Inquirer or fake news, right?
So that one. Well, Allegra is I used to take Allegra because it was good, as you said, it lasts for the day or whatever. I take the Costco brand, Kirkland.
Yes, I do too. You
allergy
recommended it,
pill
and I
now,
love it.
yeah.
It works fine.
So I take it once a day, but allergies have been. I was in Connecticut, and they didn't bother me as much as they do in the Mid-Atlantic. I think there's something in the air in the Mid-Atlantic. Of all the places I've lived in the country, the Philadelphia and this Delaware area has been the worst. I didn't have it in Oregon as bad, Minnesota, Ohio, but this part of the country, for whatever reason, I seem to be more allergic than the Northeast or.
This past weekend, my eyes went crazy. I can only say it must be all the dead leaves and plant matter from the fall.
Yeah.
Because I can't think of anything else it would be.
Yeah. So, well, that's okay.
All right. So, yeah.
Just mine is very, very, very different story. It's what
staid.
what I opened with, and I actually changed the headline a little bit, but the headline is Dolly Parton quietly funded black school bands. And then it says the woman's a national treasure. So this came out of a story on CNN, and it's a very short story, and I'll tell you the reason why I picked it after I go through it. It says Dolly Parton has quietly been paying for uniforms, instruments, and other necessities. Dolly Parton has paid for band uniforms and instruments for kids at a majority black high schools with zero publicity, a writer has revealed. Michael Harriot tweeted that he noticed the quietly wonderful phenomenon when speaking to former high school choir and band members. He said there was a surprising number of people who attended majority black high schools, and he would ask them about fundraising for the uniforms and instruments, and they would always come back with, "Oh, Dolly Parton paid for ours."
I love that. That's cool.
He said the story was corroborated by many, with one person replying to his tweet, 30 plus years ago, I was in a high school marching band in East Tennessee. One year we were playing another high school, and dang, that band looked great. They were equipped with the best uniforms, great instruments, flags, everything. They were from a mountain area that was very poor. And we were trying to figure out where they got all of this great equipment, and it was paid for by Dolly Parton. This woman's a national treasure. Another user continued the thread explaining how Pigeon Forge, home of Dollywood, the family amusement park owned by the country music legend, was struggling with a growing population that was underprivileged until Dolly Parton stepped in. The middle school was bursting at the seams with kids. The school was too small, and all the kids were sharing lockers. She called the Board of Education and said, please replace all the lockers so each kid could have their own locker and send me the bill.
Wow.
And she did that, and each kid ended up having their own locker at the school. They said she's known for her charity work, but demands no publicity. She said her philanthropy and charity work is just one of the defining features of her celebrity status. She's provided cash incentives to prevent children in her local area from dropping out of school. She set up reading programs to improve literacy rates and is a firm supporter of the Black Lives Matter movement. One of her areas that she supported is the Imagination Library, where she gives children free books up until the age of 5. And so far, she has over 2 million children registered with the project. She's also been paying full tuition fees, including all textbooks and additional fees for all employees, student-age kids at Dollywood who will go to college. So she pays tuition, textbooks, and fees for employees whose kids will go to college that work at Dollywood. She also, as we know, donated $1 million to help Moderna with a COVID test. What I like about this with Dolly is there's so many celebrities, and I often would scratch my head. I'm sure they may give money.
Yeah.
But I hear about, and I'll just throw names out, Madonna,
Yep.
Oprah, Ben Affleck, Angelina Jolie. They all give money to, a lot of them give money to Africa for schools and set up schools. And that's all very well and good. And perhaps they do give money to the U.S. But there are so many inner city, rural, poor, underprivileged schools in our country that need help, that are underfunded. You talk to any school teacher that's having to scrape together money to buy books or pencils or feed our kids in the morning, just to make sure they have a meal. And here's Dolly Parton actually doing something and doesn't want publicity for it. But people did find out about it. And so
Quiet philanthropy.
Right. And I hope others are doing it as well. But, you know, some of these other celebrities that make a big deal about starting these schools in other countries, and while that's admirable, I hope they're still doing an equal amount here, at least in our country. I don't see them or hear about it. I do hear about, you know, them setting up schools in, Mali or South Africa or something. But
Of course, you know, a broader thing. I applaud this. I love this. And I'm glad you brought up Dolly Parton. You know, Angela Lansbury passed away a week and a half ago. Legend of Broadway and screen. And I read a little article that I was going to actually do for I caught my eye, and it talked about all the work she did in the early days of HIV/AIDS to do fundraising, to bring attention to the thing. She was just a tireless, force for good when that was going on, and always has been. And a lot of this stuff you didn't know about because they just do it out of their heart. But here's something to think about. When you're talking about Dolly Parton having to do this for schools, lockers, books, musical instruments, why aren't our tax dollars paying for this already?
well, and that's the issue. That's,
You know, why do we need this level of philanthropy? We're one of the richest countries in the world. Everybody screams about education, but they don't want to fund. They don't want to pay teachers a living wage. They don't want to fund the schools. And you know, I have friends who have kids in public schools, and they have to like contribute money for crayons. And we didn't have any of it. We had all of that stuff when we were kids, right?
My niece is a teacher, and she sets up every year before school an Amazon page for people to donate books, backpacks, crayons,
Supplies.
pencils, supplies, tissue paper. I mean, art supplies, everything. And yes, they're not paid very well at all. And it's sad. It's exactly what you said, that we want to force people to have children, but we don't want to take care of them once they have them. and we do a horrible job with education. That's why I said, whether it's an inner city school or it's a rural school in Appalachia or somewhere, a poor part of the rural America, that it's important to educate our population. And So kudos to Dolly Parton or anybody that helps with that sort of thing. But you're exactly right. Our taxes should be, we're the wealthiest country in the world. We should be taking care of our children.
Well, if you're a Florida resident, are you happy that Ron DeSantis just spent a couple $1 million sending people up to Martha's Vineyard when you could have had art supplies and
You could have, yeah, you probably could have fed the students for a week. Gave them a hot meal.
Tim, I think we're totally outliers on this. It sounds so
really?
rational, right?
Yeah.
But if people really cared about it, that's what they'd be screaming at politicians about, right? At the local level and the federal level. I don't know.
Oh, school boards. Your mom is a teacher, probably. I mean, she probably saw it coming. I mean,
She's glad she's out, and she remembers. She always says that our generation, a couple classes before us and after us, was the golden era of public education in Connecticut. She said it was well funded. You had all the supplies you needed. I don't remember having to do anything except buy a lunchbox, a 3-ring binder, and a couple pencils and pens. Everything else the school had, right?
Right, but we also were taught, you had to cover your books. If you didn't, you got in trouble because the books had to be passed down. You had to protect the books. And
I remember that. I remember taking a paper bag and making the book
right,
cover
and there was
out
a
of
certain
it.
time you had X amount of days to make sure your books were covered and your books were checked, and you just respected the property. And same with when you took books out
And
of the
teachers,
library.
you respected
Right.
teachers as well. My mother, towards the end, I'm sure your niece would say this, towards the end of my mom's teaching career, she said, I didn't sign up to do this job to be a disciplinarian or to be someone's parent in the classroom. They're here to learn. And if they bring problems in and I discipline, I shouldn't be getting in trouble for that and all that stuff. So, yeah.
No, if we did something wrong, the parent believed the teacher. Now, if you
Yeah.
do something
Yeah.
wrong, it's the teacher's fault. Yeah.
And it's, yeah. Oh,
Hey, it's
boy.
happening at college campuses too. I've talked to professors that say you cannot believe if a kid gets a D, the parents are calling the professor. How come you gave my son a D? Well, A, he did not show up to class.
A.
And it's a participation class where you have to get up and speak and we're paying all this money. He doesn't get a D. So you understand.
Everybody gets a trophy. Not when we were growing up. All right, folks, we're going to take a super quick break. And when we come back, we have a business birthday and a shop talk for you. So stay with us, and we'll see you on the other side.
You're listening to The Focus Group with Tim and John. Learn more at focusgroupradio.com. Now back to The Focus Group with Tim and John. Available pretty much everywhere.
Hey, welcome back to the Focus Group. Moving right along. I'm Tim Bennett here with John Nash, and be sure to join us here each week, either on our video broadcast or our audio. You can find all of our media at focusgroupradio.com. Be sure to follow along by clicking on wherever you find us, whether it's Spotify or TuneIn or Apple Podcasts, or
Pandora.
or Amazon or Xfinity
Google.
or the Googles.
Even
Wherever.
Facebook. Even Facebook.
That's right. Facebook, YouTube, yabba dabba do. So, Mr. Nash, we have our business birthday today.
Everyone does celebrity birthday greetings, but the Focus Group is the only show in the universe that celebrates business birthdays.
Born today, October 26th in 1803, probably the most sad sack birthday we've done.
Is that true?
Yeah, poor
All
Joseph.
right.
Joseph Aloysius Hansom. As I said, born October 26, 1803, died June 29th, 1882 at 78. He's a British architect, and he worked in the Gothic revival style, but he also invented the Hansom Cab, and then founded a architectural journal, which is still in business. He founded it in 1843, known as The Builder, but it's still in print today in the UK, known as Building. It's a building magazine, and it's actually the only periodical in the UK that still covers the building trades. But, and why I say he's a sad sack is he's done all these things and really never got compensated for any of it. And so as a business person, he just always seemed to be a little bit out of luck or for some reason was too trusting. So as I said, he's from the UK. He was born in York. his family, most of his brother, his father, they were all architects, and so he grew up in a family of architects and builders, and learned the trade, and started out as an architect, and had joined a group of people in a group called the Operative Builders Union, and many people called him a socialist, which was not a good thing at the time.
Jesus.
So he ended up leaving that group and got disillusioned with architecture and started trying to form some groups and just kept kind of, I want to say, losing his way, but ended up coming up with the idea of designing what he called a patent for a safety cab on the suggestion of an employer. So this was a distinctive safety feature of a cab or a carriage with a suspended axle, which had larger wheels, and a lower position on the cab, which led to less wear and tear and fewer accidents. And he called it the Hansom Safety Cab. It would combine speed and safety, as I said, a lower center of gravity. It was great for cornering. It had one passenger, had a high hood. It separated the passenger from the driver, had a square body and a square frame. The wheels were high up, as I said. He had patented it, and he wanted to sell it, and he ended up selling. He wanted to produce it. It became very popular in 1835 in the streets of London, and he decided to sell the patent for production, and sold it for the sum of £10,000.
Which in today's dollars would be, I don't know, $2,500 or something crazy like that.
Yeah, not a lot, right? So, but the person who purchased it never paid him. Had some sort of financial difficulties. However, took the patent and
manufactured
subsequently,
Hansom cabs,
did some modifications. And the Hansom Cab, they kept the name, but became a worldwide kind of ubiquitous feature of the 19th century street scene. Cab was short for cabriolet, so this was the design of the carriage from the old Hackney carriages, which became vehicle for hire. And they also introduced in the cab, or in the Hansom Cab, a clockwork mechanism called a taximeter, which is where we get the name taxi from, or taxi cab. And so they enjoyed immense popularity. At one time, there were 7,500 of them at the height of popularity in the streets of London. And then they moved on through European cities of Paris, Berlin, St. Petersburg, and then, of course, 19th century, very commonly used in New York City. And he never received any money for it at all.
So if you're watching on the video, Tim provided a picture of Hansom, Joseph Aloysius Hansom, and a Hansom Cab. And I saw this picture of the Hansom Cab, and I was immediately taken back to Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah.
Like, one of my favorite Holmes was produced by Granada Television. I think it was in the mid-90s. And Holmes and Watson would leave the flat, 221B Baker Street, and there would be Hansom Cabs everywhere. So if there were 7,500 in London, they would simply raise their walking stick and the thing would pull up. But, it's an interesting, it's a balancing act, right? The cab itself is balanced by the fact that it's hooked up to the horse, because there's only two wheels.
Right, and they love the fact that you only needed one horse, so you didn't need these big carriages, and you can move around quickly. And it was designed really just for one person, but they said sometimes you'd squeeze two in.
Yeah.
It made the journey cheaper, and it just was agile. It steered easier. And they said there were notorious traffic jams because people would have either 2 horses or 4 horses with these big carriages. So it was very popular and did quite well, but he never profited from the enterprise, which was too bad. So he got discouraged, and he went off and started a journal. In 1843, he found this architectural journal called The Builder, which ended up flourishing. And this journal, to this day, as I said, is still published up until 1996. It was called The Builder, and then it changed its name to Building. And it continues to this day to be published. But neither he or his partner ever got any money for the enterprise or profited from it.
That's why it's sad sack, right?
Yeah, I mean, so he did these things that he never got money from. But he then went back into architecture. And so between 1854 and 1879, he devoted himself to architecture. He designed and erected a number of great, important buildings in both the public and private sector around the UK. Mostly churches and schools, and around the UK, Australia, and South Africa. To this day, there are over 200 buildings that are still around that he built.
My
are
God.
designed, and there's a whole list of them. I'm not going to
Did
go through
he
them.
die a pauper, or did he not just? I guess the question would be, he maybe had a good life. He could have had a better one if people had been more honest and treated him better.
Yeah, it was funny. So you answered, you did exactly what I did. I wanted to know how he died, and all it just simply said is he died. It just said that he died in,
In his sleep or something.
he died in the UK on June 29th, 1892 at 78 years old. It didn't say what he died of. It didn't say anything about his personal life or how he ended up dying. But it did say that he had done this very well-respected magazine that to this day is still published, and that the Hackney Cab, which essentially changed transportation in the 19th century, but he didn't profit from either entity that he was part of. So that's why I said he was kind of sad sack. But Joseph Aloysius Hanson.
Handsome. When you
business
sent the
person.
images over, that all I could think of was Sherlock Holmes. Because any movie that you see from that time period, any television show, whatever, it's a Hansom Cab.
Well,
That
they
was
do-
the way to get around.
Yeah, they do mention that there are two in pristine shape Hansom Cabs on display, and they do mention Sherlock Holmes. There might be. Is there a Sherlock Holmes museum?
Oh yeah, sure, yeah.
So they mention one is in a Sherlock Holmes museum. I'd have to pull it up. There's one in a Sherlock Holmes museum and one in a Vanderbilt. Yes, here it
okay.
is. One at the Remington Carriage Museum in Alberta, Canada, a restored Hansom Cab once owned by Vanderbilt. And then the other one, another surviving example, is owned and operated by the Sherlock Holmes Museum in London. So those are two originals that are in existence. One's in Canada and one's in
Tim,
London.
isn't that perfect that I pegged it to Sherlock Holmes?
Yep. No, exactly.
It's so stupid of me.
And the original business in Manhattan was located on 133 Water Street.
Downtown, sure.
Yep. Yep. And it, I guess
Financial district. That makes a lot of sense. The bankers would be getting Hansom
Yes, it was
cabs.
the offices of Duncan Sherman and Company, which served as bankers to the firm.
There you go.
Yeah. So they had
Good
a
one.
fleet of them.
Good business birthday. I would have liked to have known the state of his financial affairs when he passed, but because sometimes we learn that people do these things and they just don't. They die penniless, or sometimes they do well.
There's been movies. A lot of times people are worth more when they die, right? There's been some movies made, and of course, pop culture references to him, and I guess there's some movies and other books written about him, but they didn't. Yeah, there was nothing. I couldn't find anything in my searching, so who knows? So Mr. Aloysius Hanson.
Handsome.
At least he got the name named after him.
Yeah, that lasts.
Yeah, we'll see. So I found this shop talk. It's a short one, but I picked it for one specific reason. Maybe I'll tell you at the end why I picked it. But so the headline is, this CEO has one weekly activity that gives him the very best ideas, and you can do it too. So the CEO is Doug Hirsch, who's the CEO and co-founder of a prescription drug savings company called GoodRX. On a sidebar, do you ever use them?
Nope.
I use them. They're actually quite good. I don't know.
Here's the thing. I have to mention this to Bob because I don't have any prescriptions that I currently take.
Okay.
But if you do, maybe it's a blood pressure, maybe it's simple stuff like blood pressure meds.
Anything. And you go in, you just sign up, and you get a little card, you just print it off, and you take it, and it could save you 20, 30, 40 bucks.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
on prescriptions. But so he does this one thing. It's this surprisingly simple method for getting the best ideas. And he said he sets aside 3 to 4 hours of alone time for deep thinking each week. And he thinks that this helps him get on track and helps him with his business and helps him center himself. And he says, there's other people or captains of industry that do very similar things. And I picked this because many times you and I have talked about people who use meditation
Yep.
and talk about they attribute a lot of their success to meditation. And I thought this was different because meditation sometimes I feel can be self-directed, where it tells you to think or breathe or feel a certain way. And when I've tried to meditate, I've tried to do it, and sometimes I think I wander too much or my head wanders too much. But this here, the way they describe this is that he goes in very intentionally with thinking about ideas for his business or where he wants his business to be or where he wants his career. Or they said you could do it for yourself as where you want your career to go or how you might want to make your business better. And so he goes in very intentionally about just simply around career or business or his industry, which is different than a meditation. Did you take the same thing away?
I did, and there's one from a meditative point of view or from a thought structure point of view. There is a paragraph that really stuck with me, and it was him describing his process. So he'll say, for Hirsch, that means sitting completely by himself somewhere, often writing on paper or a whiteboard to build out his thoughts. Those few uninterrupted hours help him pump out his very best ideas for advancing GoodRX. So this idea of sitting with a piece of paper or a whiteboard, the key here is he's not typing into a computer. He's not like working on a word processor. This is eye-hand coordination. He's writing things down. And Tim and I have talked about this on a number of different shows in the past where there's something about handwriting or there's something about the mechanical act of, doing either you're drawing pictures on a whiteboard or, as I said, on paper that creates this interesting feedback loop. And I think it probably keeps you more in the moment than simply sitting quietly and meditating. I could be wrong, but I know for me, the act of like pen to paper, once it starts happening, I always wonder, am I going to read my own handwriting later? And B, there is something that makes it stick. So right. I think this is a really great thing. The fact that he says it's difficult to find those 3 or 4 hours a week, I don't think so. I think if you're many of us, and I do this on Sunday, I set up my schedule for the week. It's loose. It's stuff I want to get done. It's stuff that I have to show up for. You could block in a 2 or 3 hour thing on your Sunday program of putting your schedule together. Do you need 3 or 4 hours? I don't know. Probably that's not a bad thing. And even if you just sit with a blank piece of paper for 2 hours before you write anything down, you're still thinking and you're still kind of sorting stuff out. My version of this, I suppose, would be a bike ride.
I was going to say, do you sit? Because when you're on your bike, you say you often come up with your best ideas because it's somewhat...
It's a very narrow band. Cycling, I've said I don't listen to headphones or anything. So when I'm on a ride, like on Saturday, I went for like a 35-mile ride, and first I notice things I don't, the routes often same routes that I go on, but I notice things that I've not seen because the leaves are falling and there's a house I can see in the background, or there's a deer on the side of the road, or, there's a guy feeding chickens or whatever. But primarily you're focused on staying upright, avoiding traffic, not hitting potholes. Like there's all this checklist of stuff to do this successfully. So all that's left is this narrow little band of thinking space. And I find that that's where I mull over problems, and I don't even know I'm doing it. And I'll halfway through a ride, I'll be like, oh, like here's an example. Remember how we were talking about finding a better word than longevity?
Right.
So I go on a bike ride and I'm riding along, and I think, a much more contemporary and cooler way of saying that is staying power. That came out, that could have come at a table with a piece of paper. It happened to come out of my head on a bike ride.
Have you practiced
meditation?
Meditation.
Mm-mm. The closest I get is yoga. And when the instructor does a 2-minute meditation at the beginning of the class where you're just sitting quietly and breathing, my mind, and the instructors will say, the mind chatters, the mind wanders. It's what the mind does, because my mind just flies off. Like, I don't even know where. And then finally you have to be conscientious and bring yourself back to the moment. But our minds are wired to constantly be thinking. So,
well, that's what our friends Todd and Jeffrey,
they swear by it.
They're religious.
They're good at it.
They do it every day, and they find time to do it every day. And Travis, another guy we worked with, does it every morning. And Travis had given me a couple of links he goes to, and it's self-guided, the one he does. I don't think Jeffrey and Todd, I think they do it now just on their own. They'll sit and go and meditate.
They're good enough at it, yeah.
But the self-guided one, I think, helps kind of keep you, because it will tell you how to, it helps with your breathing or the in and out, probably like your yoga instructor. But yeah, I find the meditation with me, I found myself sometimes saying, okay, let's hurry up and get it over with. Which is not what it's supposed to, right? It's not what it's supposed to be. And so I wonder, and I do wander. I'm like, oh, okay, I got to do this. I got to do that. Let's hurry this up. I got things to do.
Well, that's like my yoga instructor, Michael. I love when he says stuff like that. The mind chatters, the mind wanders is what the mind does. Bring it back. And so you're forgiving yourself the fact that this is what that thing does. But it's also an interesting reminder that everybody's the same. They're all doing it, right?
But so this one here, and that's why I picked this, because I thought, well, this is different. So if you sat down, if you said, okay, I'm going to, whether it's Sunday or however you pick out your time to say, okay, because he also talks about how, who else did he mention? He said Tim Armstrong, the ex AOL CEO, does this. LinkedIn CEO Jeff Werner, and Bill Gates has done something similar where they will do these scheduled times where they'll just sit and think about, for 4 hours of thinking or something. But I guess if you had a list of things of what you wanted to do with your company, because they gave the example of your career. So if you wanted to do this for yourself about your career, where do I want to be? Excuse me, where do I want to be in 5 years? How much am I growing in my current job? What are the areas of my work that I can improve on? I don't know if you could do that for 3 hours.
I got to this one, and that's where the brakes, that's where this brake screeched on. And I'm like, okay, what if your problem is even more profound than this? What if you don't know what you want to do?
Right.
So where are you going to be in 5 years if you don't know what you want to do? Okay, I'll take a good guess. But
or a lot of people don't like what they're doing.
Yeah,
right?
but they have to do it anyways.
Right, because there's necessity of you've got to pay bills and you have to do, there's a lot of issues.
Responsibilities. When we were up at the
Exactly.
Cape for Bob's family reunion, one of his, we were talking to his cousin Jim, and we were talking about jobs and stuff, and Jim said, look, I've had plenty of jobs in my career that I did not like. I could not wait to get out of, but you got to do them.
Right.
You got to do them. I thought that was a little more realistic than, follow your heart.
Oh, just quit.
Or just quit.
The great resignation. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, guess what?
And, on that score, a lot of stuff that was happening during the pandemic is coming back to bite people in the ass. Do you remember? And I was always skeptical of this. Like, have you been reading about Peloton and their fall from grace?
Yeah.
Their stock price is cratering. People aren't buying the equipment. Why? Because they're going back to the gym. Because it's something they do for themselves. It's a change of pace. It's a different environment. And anybody who's listening who's tried to work out at home, God bless if you've done it successfully for a couple of years in a row and you have a completely good routine and you have all the equipment you need to do it, because I've tried it and oh boy.
Well, that's why the Bowflex was the most expensive clothes hanger on the planet
And the
in the
world,
80s.
yeah.
A lot of people bought home gym equipment. That's always been the case. A lot of people always bought home gym equipment. I don't have to go to the gym. It's going to be easy.
Yeah. Yay, I could just go into the room and do a spin on my bike and get yelled at by an instructor. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we like to be with people. We're it's not,
Social animals.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right. They were talking about, so General Motors has announced they want people to all go back to the office, and there's all kinds of pushback.
Which
So they're trying to figure out how they're going to fill the.
Apple had the same problem. Tim Cook announced a return to the office, and they had to walk it back, which that's a surprising thing to me. I mean, Apple's got this incredibly new, beautiful campus. It looks like a flying saucer landed out there. But you get, I don't know. You get used to the new routines, right? I don't know why they just don't allow hybrid to happen naturally. Like take a day or two off as you need it, or work from home as you need it, but we want you here.
Well, there was so much that revolved around punctuality at work, being on time, right? So you had to be in work at 8:30 or 9 o'clock, and then you had to take your lunch at a certain time, and you had to do this at a certain time. And when you are allowed to work at home now, you create your own schedule. And so people have gotten used to that. So you could still get your work done, but maybe you got your haircut at 10 o'clock.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you didn't have a meeting.
But then you did, right.
But then you did your work at 7 o'clock at night when you wouldn't be at the office normally.
Time shifting, yeah.
Yeah. So just like we've done with the media habits. So there's an argument to be made for both, but I do think that an awful lot has been absent from not having the interaction with people at work, because there's other things that do get done when you might bump into somebody in the hallway or the elevator or outside or in the parking lot or whatever. So,
Well, that was a good shop talk, and I think it's always good to have a discussion around things that allow us to organize our thoughts, come up with new ideas, and just have that me time to kind of like process things. So I'm always in favor of that. So it's a good one. All right, we want to thank you for joining us today here on the Focus Group. FocusGroupRadio.com is the URL for our website. You'll find all our media there, the audio broadcast and the video as well. Video comes out Wednesdays at 1 Eastern Time, and Saturday is when the audio drops. And of course, check out TFG Unbuttoned, our 20-minute audio-only podcast, just as popular as this show, as we'd like to say. And before we let you go, we want to remind you, and I've seen a lot of this on the road lately, and it really is shocking when a car starts veering towards the rumble strip, you know, that thing they put along the brrr, and you go by, and inevitably someone's got a keyboard, a phone, on the wheel. Most modern cars have hands-free. You can dictate a text message. So what if it doesn't come through perfectly? At least your hands are on the wheel. You're paying attention to the road. So don't text and drive, arrive alive. We'd like you to join us again next week. And that's why we say don't text and drive, arrive alive. But everybody have a good one, and we'll see you in the new week.
It's The Focus Group with Tim Bennett and John Nash. Accessible on all platforms. Subscribe, like, and rate us on your platform of choice. Learn more at focusgroupradio.com.
That was a stunning focus group.